The Confederacy of Independent Systems was the antagonistic faction of the Clone Wars era, though it was rather short-lived and ultimately it was a front for the Sith. Most Clone Wars stories depict the Separatists with some degree of evil, but there were cracks in this facade, and it was indeed a facade, for the Confederacy wasn't entirely evil. While no one is denying the evilness of General Grievous, the Sith, or the Separatist Council, it's important to remember that there was more to the Separatist movement than them, much more.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The Confederacy of Independent Systems lasted for only 5 years, from its founding with 24BBY's Raxus address to its dismantling at the end of the Clone Wars. At first, it was most definitely a confederacy, a very loose collection of separatist planetary governments that were only vaguely united under the Articles of Secession and under Count Dooku. At some point, likely shortly before the outbreak of the Clone Wars, the Separatist Parliament was created as a ruling body for the Confederacy, and it served as a more efficient version of the Galactic Senate, at least for a time. With the Battle of Geonosis, however, everything changed. The corporate factions that came to form the Separatist Council had always quietly supported the CIS, but they became official factions within the Confederacy with their meeting on Geonosis. Their private military forces became the backbone of the CIS military, and the Separatist Council essentially usurped the power of the Separatist Parliament, allowing the Sith to run their war directly. The rest, of course, is history. The military arm of the Confederacy was where the evil of the faction originated from, and unfortunately, it was by far the most visible part. This was, by design, as we'll discuss later. The Sith, of course, were evil beyond doubt, and though the dark acolytes they recruited were often more misled, they generally fell into that category as well. As we've discussed in earlier videos, General Grievous was also evil beyond a doubt, which was why Darth Sidious made him the face of the Confederacy. But aside from them, the only true evil in the Confederacy came from its corporate powers. The Separatist Council weren't as malicious as the Sith, but their pure, unadulterated greed made them just as bad, if not worse. Of course, the factions that they ran provided the bulk of the Confederacy's navy and droid army, and so, unfortunately, Newt Gunray and his contemporaries had much more of a sway over the doings of the CIS than anyone with more redeemable qualities. But that doesn't mean that those people didn't exist. After all, remember where the Confederacy came from. At first, the Separatist movement was actually a pretty noble cause. While the Separatist Council might have been the most visible arm of the CIS, it is important to remember that it was a confederacy of independent systems, and for the most part, those systems weren't wrong in their wishes for secession. The Separatist Parliament represented this good side of the Confederacy, as the Clone Wars episode heroes on both sides detailed, and even though it was mostly powerless during the Clone Wars, it was still much more pure intentioned than the Galactic Senate. Because, after all, the Republic was absolutely corrupt. Whether it was irredeemably so is a matter of debate, but that is a very real possibility, and to around half of the galaxy, that seemed to be the case. The Sith, of course, made this happen. 1,000 years of meddling had given corporations and other lobbyists enough power in the Senate to cripple it entirely, resulting in widespread corruption and total inefficiency. But just because it was a Sith plot doesn't mean that it wasn't a weakness of the system or that it didn't affect anyone. While the richer systems in the core were mostly oblivious to the effects of this corruption, more rimward systems felt it acutely. For them, inefficiency in the Senate could mean mass starvation or worse, and the threat of such bleak circumstances results in desperation. And for what it's worth, this wasn't just a Sith plot either. The core worlds had been ravaging the Rim for tens of thousands of years, since long before the Sith Lords were even an idea, and they were doing it during the Republic Golden Age with or without Sith influence. When Count Dooku put out a call for secession from the Republic in 24 BBY, many Rimworlds finally decided that enough was enough. Helping to form a confederacy of independent systems would allow them to get the attention they needed, as the thinking went for many worlds and even entire sectors, and so they did just that. And until war broke out, that's exactly what happened. The nascent Confederacy did indeed help to improve life on those member worlds that had suffered greatly under the Republic. And now, we shall cite some specific examples. One of the most important secessions of the Separatist crisis was that of the Abrian sector, represented by Yukio, a cluster of agricultural worlds near Rishi. These worlds, and many like them, had been neglected by the Republic for centuries, treated merely as breadbaskets instead of proper worlds with their own citizens and needs. They seceded and stuck with the CIS because even when the Separatist Council gained power, the civilian government still paid much more attention to their needs than the Republic ever did. Jabim was one of the best examples of this. The Republic had ignored problem after problem faced by the local Jabimi despite their Republic membership, leaving them to face pirates, slavers, and plagues alone. Until, of course, it was discovered that the planet was loaded with precious ores. Then, the Republic tried to lock down Jabim and nationalize the ore to prevent them from trading with their separatist neighbors, which led Jabim to secede a few months after the Clone Wars broke out. For some planets, it was simply business. Sluis Van and Clactor 7 seceded not because they were evil, but because many of their most important trading partners had seceded, and they could sympathize their views enough to join them in breaking from a system that had repeatedly slighted them. Yagdul, a crossroads world that became a separatist stronghold, had perhaps the best reason to secede. Their galaxy-renowned mathematicians had created undisputable mathematical proofs that the Republic in its current state was going to collapse, and the odds looked much better for their world if it joined the Confederacy. Unfortunately, it appears that their math didn't account for the Sith. Some worlds were just pissed at the Republic over mismanagement of past conflicts. Ando, Trandosha, and several Quarren colonies fell into this category, with Ando and its planetary neighbors being representative of this phenomenon. A few decades before the Clone Wars, Andoan space was in the middle of a fierce civil war between the Spivarolda and the Andoan Free Colonies. The Spivarolda was on the verge of victory when the Republic intervened, and they intervened in the worst way imaginable. They separated and disarmed both sides, refusing to take into account who was at fault or in the right in favor of a lazy, ineffective form of equal treatment that just ensured that the bloodbath was all the worse when the Spivarolda and Free Colonies went at it again during the Clone Wars. But the most tragic and most important reasons for secession were the cases of the Republic being actively malicious toward a world. Take New Plimto, a world that had an economy based on a single export, which the Republic banned for no real reason. Their economy collapsed, and when they complained, the Republic first ignored and then isolated them. When the Confederacy offered to open up trade to New Plimto, the planet seceded immediately, and they had every right to. And this wasn't just a singular case. Kaylee, for example, has a similar story. These worlds were not the exception. The vast majority of the Confederacy of Independent Systems fell into this category, but despite this, their stories were swept under the rug, and they just got roped into the evil represented by General Grievous and the corporate oligarchs of the Separatist Council. This, once again, was no accident. It was exactly how Darth Sidious intended for things to be. From the very beginning, he and Dooku had planned to tie these independent systems, these worlds that had fair qualms with the Republic, in with indisputable evil. Some of you may have noticed that the stories of many of these worlds sound an awful lot like the stories of worlds that joined the Alliance to restore the Republic, the rebellion against the Galactic Empire. In many cases, that's because the same worlds fell into both categories, and because their reasons for seceding or rebelling respectively were oftentimes the same. Just as the rebels wanted freedom from a tyrannical empire, the separatists wanted freedom from a corrupt republic that was doing nothing at all for them. In fact, the remnants of the CIS that survived the Clone Wars, which the Empire justified its existence with a 2-year-long war against, were the very foundation of the Rebel Alliance. The political leadership of the Alliance was born out of the Loyalist movement in the Galactic Senate, but the military foundation and the early backbone of the movement came right out of the ruins of the Confederacy. Many former Separatists became rebel heroes, with one notable example from Disney's new canon being Cassian Andor. In fact, before the Mon Calamari came along, the heart of the rebel fleet was a section of old Clone Wars era Separatist ships. The Empire, of course, pounced on this connection. Because he had tied the Separatists of the Clone Wars era to the evil of the Separatist Council, Sidious was able to paint the rebels with the same Separatist brush and create the same sense of good guys versus bad guys in the populace that he had during the Clone Wars. Fortunately for the galaxy, however, more people saw through these lies this time round, and the general populace didn't make the same mistake a second time. So that's the story of how the Confederacy of Independent Systems actually wasn't all that evil. But as per usual guys, I want to know what you think. Has this video warmed you up to the Separatist side of things, or do you still believe that they were Separatist scum? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And as per usual guys, just before you go, make sure you check out all the links in the description below. For all our gamers out there, we've got the Geetsly's gaming network where you can play our Gmod and Roblox servers. For anybody who just wants to chat with the general Star Wars community, all of our Discord servers are available as well. And for any of you into history, I do have my second history channel called The Front. That's going quite well at the moment, and we post high quality history videos there weekly. So make sure you check that out. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.